Hello and welcome to this review of the My Hero Academia OVA Piece of Cake, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives. I love how expressive the art and animation are in this OVA. This whole thing has a flair of the early days of this series and is a short, fun little story. Now I'm going to be honest with you, dear listener, I originally didn't know this OVA existed and I had a different video in mind to do for this weekend, but hey, I've discovered about it, and it's as good a time as any to talk about it because, you know, the Vigilantes anime is going to start in a few days' time. So, anyway, here we are with an OVA, which is an adaptation of a special manga which was made to promote the then upcoming Your Next Movie, which I reviewed a few months ago, and the OVA itself came out in February. Now, this isn't the first time that there's been an OVA to promote one of the movies. I'm fairly certain that there was one for the previous movie, but of course there was also a special filler episode to promote it as well, and I don't know if there was an OVA to promote the movie before that, but hey, this is the kind of thing that we've seen many times up until this point with this series, and this OVA, I believe, is available on the Blu-ray release. I'll be honest with you, I can't afford the Blu-ray release at the moment, so I had to make do with a found version with some pre-generated, auto-generated subtitles, so I will admit that I'm basing my review on a vague understanding of certain events here. I will just say, always try to support original releases as and when you can do. I do intend to buy a copy of this as soon as I can do, but I can't right now because I'm just a poor, small little fella. But in any case, this OVA seems to take place a few hours before the events of the most recent movie. I'm saying hours in a more relative abstract term. It seems to be the same day, you know, before we had that really cool action sequence where Midoriya flies out the back of the van. It's around the time before our heroes set off on their big patrol to do with all the escapees. Now, I do, if I remember correctly, I think there is an episode in the most recent series where we get a quick montage of them doing just this kind of thing, them dealing with the escapees, so I suppose timeline-wise, it's around the time that all that was kicking off, so hey, if you really want to put this into some kind of timeline, you know roughly whereabouts it's supposed to be. So, you know, after, I will just say is that I really do, like I say in the headline positives, I really do like how expressive and dynamic the animation is in this short little OVA. After nearly 6 months of the most recent season being rather drab and dark visually, it was great to see just how bright and expressive the animation in this series can be. Now, that's not a slight against the most recent series. This isn't me saying, oh, it wasn't up to snuff or it wasn't any good or anything like that, because quite frankly, it was good. It was great more often than not, but it wasn't quite like this. They're both good, but it's very much an apples to oranges kind of thing. They're good in their own different way because they're two very different ways about going about this. I really do love, however, how just alive and fresh and colourful this OVA does look. For it is essentially just one short scene, one that, I'll be honest, could quite easily have been part of almost any given episode in the first 4 or 5 episodes. It is just really well animated. Look, they didn't need to put this much effort into something like this, but they really did. This could easily have just been, like I say, just a scene that they slotted in somewhere. It didn't need to be its own thing, or it could have been a filler episode, but I suppose we weren't going to do that. But it is just really rather wonderful that we get an OVA, short as it is, that has animation which is more or less on par with some of the high moments of the most recent season. Granted, it doesn't really have many things to do to truly show off that spectacular flair, but even with what we got here, the little sequences we do get within all of this do have a similar kind of flair and presentation to them. Again, it might not be more fantastical or wild, out of this world, but still, it's visually impressive for what it is. It hits the mark and then goes beyond. It gives us every bit of polish and skill and flair to really take this to the next level. Again, this didn't need to look as good as it did to. It could have just looked as good as about any other televised animation and it would have been perfectly fine, but here we don't get that. They're really going out their all to make this as enjoyable and as skillfully put together a little experience as possible. Even though I think this might be one of the shortest OVAs that they've done, but hey, whatever it'll be. I do love the little sequence that we get where Bakugo is just bollocking everyone, and he's just yelling there at Midoriya, and just getting that moment where Midoriya just pauses, freezes in place, and I just love the look on Midoriya's face when that happens, just how serious and worn down he looks, and it gives us this rather candid look into his mental state at this part in the story. There's still a part of him that reflexively tenses up when he hears Bakugo yelling, that part of him that still remembers when Bakugo was just his bully and his tormentor, and as such it's almost this Pavlovian response that when he hears Bakugo yelling, there's a part of him that worries he's going to start getting beaten up or what have you. But then there's also this part of him that is just done with Bakugo at this point, and he can't deal with just how petty and bitchy that Bakugo is being in this moment. He's tired, boss. He's just damn tired. And even though that whole bit was like 3 seconds in a 15-second thing, it really does convey just how worn down, just done with so much Midoriya is. He still wants to be the hero, he still wants to save the day, but by God, he could really do without Bakugo being such a whiny little so-and-so. And beyond this, again, kicking me with Bakugo as he seems to be the more flair and interesting character within this episode, I love the bit where, again, he's just yelling at Shoto. It is just this fun little bit where you just have Bakugo going, yeah, well, I'm like the strongest here, I'm the best and you're the rest, and you're just a part of the rest of the group, and that kind of thing as he does, and I really do love that. It's about on par with the kind of things that you would expect with that character, and it is just fun for what it is, for what it needs to be, adds an extra element of comedy into all of this. Like I say, I think that a lot of gags and such might have been lost on me because of the nature in which I'm watching this, but a lot of it did work, a lot of it really was enjoyable, and then we got that cutaway shot to the extended cast with that look on their face like, wow, we're relevant! Someone in this series actually acknowledged us! Look, I'll be blunt, I cannot in good faith praise this OVA for doing something with the extended cast, because at the end of the day, they don't really do that much, and their mere presence within this is not really enough to praise it, but at the end of the day, I still liked the fact that they were in it, and they were in some way just part of all of this. Because at the end of the day, let's be blunt, their presence in this OVA is just to be a kick-off point for the discussion that is at the heart of this episode, and for them to get balked at by Bakugo. It's fun that they're there, and I'm happy that they're there, but I can't in good faith do my usual thing of, oh wow, it was great to see the extended cast, because at the end of the day, they do contribute as much as they need to, but nothing beyond that. The basic thrust of this OVA is to explain how Midoriya is able to use so many different quirks, both switching between them but also using different quirks in combination with them and different quirks at the same time as one another. He explains it as though it's like just picking out a different tool from the toolkit or just pressing a different button. And he explains how he's able to keep track of all these different quirks and how the different works thanks to his handy-dandy generic notebook that you'll find in shops all across the world that cosplayers are now going to go bandy to try and find an exact replica of. Maybe they will do, maybe they won't. Godspeed to you, you wackos. But in any case, you know, this is the kind of thing that we've seen in the past. This is the kind of stuff that I think has been, well, it has been in the past, but I don't think it's really been that expressed or noted in quite a long time. I don't know if by this point in the story, or rather I don't remember by this point in the story, as to whether or not everyone knows that Midoriya has been keeping notes on people. Not in a creepy way, I might add. It's just that he makes a lot of notes about quirks and how they work. He is very much a superhero obsessive, so as we saw in the early days of this series, he just made notes about everyone's different quirks and how they could work and how people could get to the next level with them and how they could really work with them, make them their next thing, make them the next powerful thing, and to help them overcome their own problems, be that personal problems or be that just problems with how their quirks function. Like I say, I don't remember as to whether this is something that was known to the cast earlier, and now this is a case of, okay, you're still doing this stuff? Oh wow, look at all this great data you have, or this is like the first time that they're seeing it, and this mostly comes to do to the fact that we're talking about something from a video, an episode that I saw like 5 or 6 years ago at this point, and also due to the fact, again, the subtitles of this version that I was watching weren't really good. It was all auto-generated stuff, and by God, the auto-generation thing was doing its damnedest, but it really can't deal with more than one person talking at once, and even then, there's a considerable delay that really screws things up. But still, given the content of the conversation, I'm going to say that the data that was in that book it wasn't about everyone else, it was about him. It was about his quirk and how it functions. This wasn't his notebook about how everyone else's quirks work. It's about him and his data, though I'd need to double check the Blu-ray copy if and when I get around to it, because I need the money for it. Maybe I should start a GoFundMe for it. I don't know. Anyway, you get the idea. I don't know exactly as to who the notes were about. I think that it was specifically about him and his quirks. Might have been about everyone else. I really don't know. But still, everything we got with the book and the arguing, it feels like something is very much in keeping with the tradition of the earlier parts of the series. Very much within that tradition, very much within that keeping. And it adds a much needed sense of light energy back into this series. I will be blunt, the previous season was not quite as bleak as I feared it would be. Surprisingly. Like, despite everything that happened within it, and despite everything that goes on within all of it, as bleak and as miserable as it wasn't quite the long midnight of the soul that I was worrying it was going to be. Whether or not that'll be the case when the series comes back in October, we'll soon see. But still, this series of events, this episode itself, ended up adding a sense of lightness that I think has been needed within the main series itself. And it was definitely missing from the season, I should say, before the most recent one. As I do enjoy it when the series, or just indeed any series like this, has these moments of lightness, of humour, and of just brevity and light into what's happening in it, because it makes things a lot more tolerable. Sure, I might have really gone off how Marvel and the whole Joss Whedon-esque thing goes about it, but you get the idea. Just having these little moments of fun within an episode really does help to sell the characters and makes them a lot more identifiable. And it makes it a lot easier to really get behind them and support them when you're seeing them as more three-dimensional characters that can have these moments of just human silliness and stupidity, rather than just the avatars for whatever they write in themselves are trying to do. All of this together, short as it is, makes for a fun little story. It's less than 3 minutes long. I think the All Might Rising OVA is the shortest one, but I will just say is that this OVA, for what it is, it's short, it doesn't extend, it overstays its welcome, and it doesn't feel too short. It hits the nail on the head exactly for what it needs to be. Again, this was an adaptation of a short little manga episode that was designed specifically to promote the upcoming movie. The fact it was released so late after the most recent movie, I will admit, feels bloody weird. I don't know why they left it so long. Maybe it was released at some event before then, but I really don't know. And it just feels odd that it's being released now. It was released in February, and a dubbed version won't be available till early April, like for a few days' time. With that said, however, let's get into the negatives. And whilst I did enjoy it, the moment that this OPA ended, there was a little voice at the back of my head that just said, was this really a story that needed to be told? And that's the kind of question I've not asked myself watching something in a very long time. Not since the days when I was being a film critic on local radio have I not asked myself this question. Like, was this really a story that needed to be told? I understand there being a promo for an upcoming movie. I can understand doing it in the manga, and I can understand doing an OVA dedicated to it, but did it really need to be told? This is an OVA that at the end of the day is just our heroes talking outside of the dorm room, talking about something that at the grand scheme of things has no major bearing on anything whatsoever. It just happens because I suppose we needed something to promote the movie. It contributes nothing, it changes nothing, it doesn't contextualize or recontextualize anything. Yes, it is good for what it is, and there's no getting away from that fact. It does give us a neat insight into Midoriya's powers and how they work, but did we really need a dedicated OVA to it? Long or short, did we really need to dedicate this time to just a conversation that could have been taken part in any given episode up until this point? Personally, I don't think we needed it. Of all the ways that you could have promoted this movie, of all the ways you could have teased what was coming next, especially given the story that happens in the upcoming movie, it's our characters standing outside a building and having a minor disagreement really the way that we do it? I don't think so. Look, I know that it might sound I'm ranting and I'm raving, I'm really going against this, but I do love the OVA for what it is, but it's nearly 2.5 minutes of which nothing of great substance really happens, and it doesn't really do a good job of really promoting or teasing anything for the upcoming movie, or the then upcoming movie. It's only in the final few seconds of it that you get the little montage of the different characters from the OVA, or rather the movie, appearing, but they appear without any kind of context. If you did not know that this was an OVA promoting an upcoming movie, you'd have no idea who these people are. And I suppose that's the reason why they didn't then include this as part of the main series, because if they did do, everyone would be expecting these cool new characters and then for them to just disappear. Even though they could quite easily have just done a fourth wall breaking thing of, see these characters and more in the upcoming movie, but they didn't. I think they might do in the OVA itself, but yeah, it feels very odd. Like, again, of all the ways that you could have promoted and teased this movie, this is a bloody weird one. I think the previous movie, they did an OVA for that, and it was our characters going to the airport. And as boring as that idea sounds, it still feels as though it has room to go with as far as just light character humour. With this, it's just people arguing outside of a building, and it doesn't give us any context into anything else. I don't want to get into how I would have done it territory, but you could have even just done a simple thing where a character from the movie, like the butler guy, is getting input to position, or he gets into some kind of fight with some goons or something like that, or, oh, we're getting reports of a yacht that's entering into our waters. Who's on it? It looks like All Might. No, it can't possibly be All Might. It must be a scheme by One for All. Ooh, and we go from there. That could have been an easier thing. Could have done that in 2.5 minutes, but we didn't. In any case, with all that said, let us get into the overview and say, look, I did enjoy this for what it is. It's cute, it's fun, it's silly, but it's a story that didn't need to be told, and if it should have been told, it should have been within an episode itself. Of all the different ways to promote a movie, having a bunch of characters arguing about something that has no bearing or consequence on that movie, let alone the series it's connected in, bends my head! With that said, however, it is enjoyable for what it is. Well, that said, however, let me know what you thought about it if you've seen this OVA. If you love it, if you hate it, let me know in the comment section down below. There's not going to be a comment corner this week because any comments I do have are for Vigilantes or from the most recent series, or possibly even from the movie. I don't want to give spoilers away for anything, so I'll just say thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!